This is the Johnny Cleveland Podcast, all things Cleveland sports, with your host, John Suchan. Good evening and welcome to another edition of the Johnny Cleveland Podcast. We are on the 4th of July weekend. How is everybody tonight? It is actually July 1st, the first day of July, and we are happy to have you along. Hope you have had a good weekend so far. It's great here in the Buckeye State. I'm going to play a little, let's see here. Let's try, see what this sounds like here. We got some rock music in the background. What do you think? Try to go with the rock music maybe? Yeah? Okay, we'll lower that a little bit. So hope all is well and hope you all have had a great weekend to this point. We have the 4th of July coming up again on Tuesday, and we can't wait to get there. Always enjoyed the 4th of July's. When I was living out in Kansas, you know, those folks in Kansas and places out west, they don't have all the rules and regulations that places like back east have, like here in Ohio. And then when it comes to 4th of July festivities, all hell breaks loose and there are no rules. And you can go buy the big fireworks and all those things that we watch here in Ohio. Well, you can actually buy those items when you're in Kansas. And folks there in their neighborhoods around the Wichita area, we would shoot them off. Neighbors would shoot them off endlessly. We didn't necessarily do that all, but a lot of our neighbors did. They were spending thousands of dollars every 4th of July. So you always had your own sort of 4th of July neighborhood block party. And it was incredible. And those are the things that I remember the most about 4th of July's. Now you come back to Ohio and they're kind of, you know, they're duds. You know, we get all excited about I think Columbus has their red, white, and blue bash. I've never been to that, but everyone goes down to the center of Columbus and watches those fireworks at night. And I remember growing up north in Wooster, Ohio, and having those great fireworks shows. There would be a couple times where they would have them at the old College of Wooster, and we'd sit on the lawn out there on the side of the hills and watch them. Now they would have them out there on the north side of Worcester, and you know, I've been back to a couple of those, and those have been pretty cool. But there's nothing like shooting them off and watching all of your neighbors shoot off these ginormous fireworks, and hopefully everybody stayed safe. At least in our neck of the woods, people did. So hope you're getting prepped for whatever you're doing. I know a lot of friends and family are traveling. There are lots of other friends and family that are, you know, doing different things like cooking out and having those sorts of things. We're going to have our family and friend cookout later tomorrow. So we're excited to have family or friends over here. And hopefully you are planning some exciting things over the next 2 or 3 days to celebrate summer and celebrate the 4th of July, celebrate America's independence. And independence is what we all are happy about, and we are free. Don't feel that very well if you're a social media fan or on social media quite a bit, especially Twitter, owned by Elon Musk, that billionaire dude. He's a little insane, and he came out with some sort of crazy policy today about if you don't have a blue check mark next to your name, that you're only allowed to have 600 feeds or downloads a day. So, you know, if most people on Twitter have hundreds or thousands or millions of followers, whenever you reload your Twitter page, you get downloaded with hundreds and thousands of tweets. And so basically Elon Musk came out and said temporarily that they would only be doing, you could only look at 600 of those tweets that come through. So for many people on Twitter today, it has been chaos and crazy. And come to find out, you know, social media, maybe we don't need something like Twitter just as badly as we maybe thought yesterday. It certainly isn't worth the pain of being told what to do. And this is a free country. And since we're celebrating Independence Day, it's a little interesting that a billionaire who has money to waste can do these things. But he owns Twitter now, so he can do what he wants with his platform. And I would think a lot of people are going to jump off of Twitter. We do have our show here that comes through on Twitter and would love for you to follow the show. But there are other platforms like Facebook that you can follow us, like YouTube that you can follow us, and there aren't any extra rules. And, you can even catch up with us on TikTok, those that are owned by China. You can even catch up with us on our podcast on TikTok. You can catch up with us on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube. There are plenty of other social media platforms that are much more accommodating to folks like ourselves who are working on our Fanatical L's network. And I'm part of that with the Johnny Cleveland podcast. So we are just happy that you're going to have a great weekend. So those are some things that are going on in the world of society. A quick note, this isn't Cleveland Browns news, but Cleveland Cavalier news. They did pick up a couple players, Max Struss and this other guy, Niang, last name Niang, who used to play at Iowa State and then recently has played a couple of years in Philly. In doing so, the Cavaliers traded away C.D. Osman and Lamar Stevens. And before yesterday, I had never heard of this guy named Max Struss and the other guy, Niang, from Philly. I do follow basketball. So they're all the hoopla about how the Cavaliers somehow got better with these sharpshooters. They're not exactly sharpshooters. So I would recommend that if you are a follower of the Cavaliers, that you do take a look. And there is no upgrade here. It's nice that now the Cavaliers are paying some guy that we've never heard of $16 million a year. It's crazy, really is crazy. And we'll see what the Cavs do next. My biggest bugaboo with the Cavs, and we won't really get into the Cavs much tonight, but I do not believe that J.B. Bickerstaff, the current coach of the Cavaliers, is any good and knows what the hell he's doing. And thus, I don't see the Cavaliers improving that much, even with new players coming in who quite honestly aren't very different from what C.D. Osman or Lamar Stevens were giving you. So that's my take on those two guys that are coming in for the Cavaliers. I know some of you who are Cavs fans are excited about these two guys. I'm not exactly sure why. They were traditionally bench players and they're going to be bench players. And if you want to start Struss or whatever his last name is, I don't see how that's going to help the Cavs that much, considering what happened at the end of last year and how they got beat in the playoffs in the first round by the New York Knicks. So we'll see if the Cavs do anything else. But as far as splash moves by the Cavaliers, those were not it. And if you're excited about those moves, I'm sorry that you're that excited about those moves. So the Browns, that's what we're talking about here, because we are a podcast that devotes our time on the Brownies. They are getting ready to start training camp. And we've talked about that start on several of our other podcasts, including this last Thursday. We had the Fanatical L's show. We had Steve Gill, who has his own Dog Pound South podcast, which is awesome. He's getting a new following of fans who, if you're from the South and you love talking Browns football and you're a diehard, then I would recommend that you listen to Steve's podcast. Just a great take that he does. But he was on that show the other night with Fanatical L's, and plus Elliot, the rocket scientist, was on there too. So we talked about a plethora of things, including the running back room for the Cleveland Browns. Elliot wrote a really interesting piece. I'll say interesting, controversial, on Dog Pound Daily, which is a great periodical. I would urge you to read it. I know some of you have been told not to read it for some crazy reasons, which I don't understand, because myself and Elliot and other writers like Joel and others are really good writers, and we write a lot of good stuff, and you should check it out, because we are in tune with what you're in tune about as Browns fans, and we encourage you to check that out. But Elliot wrote an article about the running back room. And in that piece, he talked a little bit about how the Browns really are overrated when it comes to the running back room. Now, you immediately go, and my mind immediately goes to Nick Chubb. We all do, right? Nick Chubb, fantastic player, probably a future Hall of Famer. He's, had 1,500 yards last season. He's been over 1,000 yards every season, pretty much his whole career. He's definitely not overrated. But Elliot's piece talked about those second, third, and fourth guys that are going to be part of that running back room. Who are those guys? Well, you got Jerome Ford, who's going into his second season, and he really doesn't have that much of any type of experience outside of, he played at Cincinnati. He had a good last season there. He originally started with Alabama, transferred to Cincinnati, had some great stats when he came out of college, but only got a handful of carries last year. And now the Browns and the expectations amongst fans are that Jerome Ford is going to take that second running back role. Okay, that might work. And it probably is what the Browns are going to try. Then you look at the third running back. You think about what the Browns had coming into this last season. We had Kareem Hunt coming back, and we had D'Ernest Johnson. D'Ernest Johnson left in free agency. He's down in Jacksonville now. And Kareem Hunt is still standing out there waiting to sign with some team. Do the Browns consider bringing him back? I don't think so. We've talked about that on this podcast before. Now, that leaves some question marks with these other guys that are on the team. Demetric Felton. Okay. He's going into his third season. He was drafted in the 6th round. He made a little bit of a splash when he first came in as a rookie, scored a wonderful little touchdown that sparked a lot of interest in fans at the stadium in that season back in 2021, and caught everybody's interest, like I said. But he's a running back. He could be a wide receiver. Joel Cade, the left guard who does the What the Elf Was That show, great perspective on things. He actually brought up the idea in his podcast this past week about who the competition really is going to be for that third running back spot. Is it Demetric Felton, or is it Elijah Moore? Elijah Moore, who's a wide receiver, came over to the Browns in a trade from the New York Jets. Could he be the guy? Could he be the guy that plays wide receiver, but then goes back into the backfield and does those sort of gadget plays and is that third running back? So is the battle really between how good is Moore going to do in training camp versus Demetric Felton? And Joel's perspective on it, and I agree with his take on this, is would you rather have a wide receiver who can go back and occasionally play running back and gadget plays, or do you rather have a third running back who can occasionally play wide receiver? And I agree with, like I said, Joel and his take that you stick with maybe Elijah Moore. And they did stick with him. They did practice some of those plays in spring training drills and whatnot. So the Browns have addressed it and are using it. And when he was in New York, he was used that way a little bit. Elijah Moore, though, we'll see what he does. He's come in with a lot of fanfare. People think that he's going to have a fantastic season, but go back and look at his track record. It's not that mind-blowing. I mean, he's gained 400 yards, 500 yards, nothing spectacular. And all of a sudden he's going to be spectacular in Cleveland's offense. We know better, Cleveland fans. You know better. I know better. We hope, and I know I've said this many times, that DeShaun Watson gets back to some of that form that he was showing back in 2018, 19, and 20. But he's 2 years out of hardly playing any football. He didn't do anything at all in the 6 games that we saw him play last year. And we can't afford as a team, as an organization, to sit around and watch DeShaun Watson in the first 4 games of the season sort of play, get his feet wet and play patty cake and see if he can do his thing again. Because After 4 games, you could be 0-4 going into that bye week and waiting to play in week 5, a great San Francisco 49ers team coming to town. And if you're saying, oh, well, the 49ers are coming all the way from California, we won't have a problem with them. Ha! Yeah, right. What happened last year at Christmas time in a dreadful snowstorm? Oh, that's right. The New Orleans Saints came into town, a dome team, and beat the Browns on a frozen tundra up at Cleveland Stadium. The Browns have a lot of pressure in this season. We're going to talk a little bit more about Coach Stefanski after the break. I know I've talked about this before, but we're going to touch on this a little bit more after the break. This is the Johnny Cleveland Podcast. I'm your host, John Suchan. We'll be right back. Okay, we are back. This is the Johnny Cleveland Podcast, and you're part of the Fanatical Elves Network. Thank you for joining us and tuning in. We were talking about the season and kind of transitioning to the pressures that are going to be on the Brownies. And there will be pressure on players and coaches. And I said right before the break, if the Browns come in and they teeter around and they still trying to figure out who they are, like most teams are, but they're going to have to do some serious stuff right off the bat. You can't afford to go 1-3 or 0-4 into that break. And if you think this fan base, and you know you're the fan, are going to take that, the Browns organization is another thing coming. Now, I don't think that Stefanski's at any risk at the moment of being let go, but we all know it's back there. You got Jim Schwartz, who's now the new defensive coordinator, and he's an experienced coach, and he could take over if needed. I think that had everything to do with part of that selection of him being the defensive coordinator. Now, Stefanski, who's steady Eddie, and I love Stefanski's attitude, demeanor. It drives me crazy, but if it can be consistent and it can be consistent and the team can win, then we're okay. But they haven't won the last 2 years. They were 8-9 and 7-10. That's not winning as much as they need to. Many of those games were close. So as Browns fans, you and I know that this is going to come down to the wire in many of these games. The pressure cooker is going to be high, and the Browns are going to have to figure a way to get some of these wins. Now, let's start with, instead of talking about Super Bowl, it was brought to our attention to get over the weekend or late this last week when we were talking to the Fanatical Elves Network, that the Browns, you might know this already, the Browns have not won a divisional title, an AFC North divisional title, or an AFC Central title way back when, since 1989. Let me repeat that. The last time the Cleveland Browns won a divisional title was 1989. How many years ago was that? 34? 34. Okay. So maybe the Browns' goal shouldn't be just to, do better or, get to the Super Bowl. Maybe they should initially say, let's go win a divisional title. That would be a good major step in the right direction. Even back in 2020, when they finished the season at 11-5, they didn't win the division. Where did the Browns have to go to play their playoff game? Oh, that's right. They had to go to Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh, I think did they win the first 12 or 13 games of the season, and then they kind of tanked at the end. And Cleveland took advantage of that. And to their credit, they destroyed Pittsburgh in that playoff game, which was phenomenal, and we will always remember that fondly. But they didn't win the division even that year. So the Browns really are going to have to focus on winning a divisional title. And that means that they have to beat the teams in their division. They get to play all 3 of those teams in the first 4 weeks of the season. They need to put their foot down, and they need to beat these teams in the AFC North. Will they do it? Can they do it? Do they care to do it? And will they put all their efforts into making sure that those are wins? These guys are professional athletes. We want to believe that they're going to put all their efforts because they are the best athletes in the world. Football is the hardest game to play, and you got to be an athlete. These guys are also getting paid millions and millions of dollars. So we'll see what happens, but there will be a lot of pressure on this Browns team. And I want to see, like you want to see, a divisional title. We haven't had one in 34 years. My God. Right? Let's focus on the little things first. Let's go out and get a divisional title this year. Let's focus on that. Let's not be saying Super Bowl, baby. We're going to come right back to it and say, oh, there's always next year. Yeah, there is always next year. But next year, we need to get a divisional title. Browns need to take care of business. They stop talking about it and their coaches being, this, that, and the other thing. And they need to go out and win. And hopefully they can do that. I would still believe in these Browns like you do. But as years pass, and you and I both have listened and have followed this team for many, many years, maybe decades, we're not getting any younger. Do the players realize the magnitude of all these losses? There was a stat sent to me by my dear friend out in Kansas, one of my colleagues back there, Chad. He likes to riddle me with negative Cleveland Browns material. It's always fun, isn't it, for those non-Browns fans out there across the country who aren't really, they don't care about the Browns. They don't care about Cleveland. They don't care about us. They like to make fun of us because they think that we have a crappy team, a crappy organization. We're not the Pittsburgh Steelers. We're not the Kansas City Chiefs. We're just crap. Well, they can keep laughing and doing all their stuff that they like to do. But what part of that stuff is sending me literature like, and you maybe have seen this, that the Browns have had the most losses of any team since the year 2000. It's a little unfair, isn't it, though, folks? I mean, come on. We're talking, the team was rebooted back in 1999. They were not the old Browns in the late 80s and the early 90s. So some of these statistics are just completely misleading and just dumb. So those of you who like to riddle other Browns fans with this anti-Browns material, you can have your little joke and have your little fun, but it's pretty stupid on your part. So there you go. So the Browns have their work cut out this year. And I hope that these players and this coaching staff are really engaged and really want what we're talking about tonight. We're talking about winning a divisional title. If we can win a divisional title, then maybe we can start talking about a Super Bowl. Because if you can't win the division, are you that good enough to be in a Super Bowl? I mean, the teams that are in the Super Bowl traditionally, like the Steelers, the Chiefs, the New England Patriots, all these teams that we've seen in the past recently, they win their division. They win their division. And if you say, oh, well, it's because Cleveland is in a really rough, tough, blue-collar division in the AFC North. Okay, fine and dandy. Cincinnati, they were crap. The Bengals were crap. And somehow they managed to turn everything around magically in a year. They have a great quarterback in Joe Burrow. I like to think of him as Joe Schmo, like my daughter Mariah likes to mention. But they did. They turned it around. The Browns can turn it around too. They can. You know it and I know it. And that's why we're talking about it today, because we care so deeply about our teams. And there's nothing wrong about that. Those of you who are out there that ridicule, and I just mentioned this, Browns fans, because of their passion and their loyalty to the organization and to the team, really have no understanding and concept of what loyalty and dedication is, right? You know that, and I know that. We know it because we're Browns fans, and we are dedicated. You don't find a group of Browns backers anywhere in this country that isn't more dedicated than any other fan base on the face of the planet. I would put my money on any Browns backers group across the country. From the group that I was part of in Wichita, those 30 or 40 loyal fans that show up every Sunday in the middle of Kansas to watch a Browns game on a Sunday afternoon. They are dedicated. You're not going to see that with 3/4 of the organizations and fan bases across the country, but the Browns do. And that's because Browns fans and Clevelanders have a loyalty and a commitment to their team and their organization because they love their organization. And those of you who ridicule that, it's just a sad case for all of you. And you can continue to root for your Steelers and your Chiefs and your California teams out there. And maybe you go root for Baker Mayfield now because he's down there in Tampa Bay. But we're going to continue rooting for the Cleveland Browns because we love them and we care about our team. With that, I hope that you have a great rest of your 4th of July weekend. I did talk on we had our Stadium Mustard show recently, and we are introducing great new Cleveland recipes, including last night, we introduced the Cleveland Polish Boy grilled sandwich. Ooh, man, go back and listen to that podcast. I described the process of putting that sandwich together, and the item was delicious, great tasting item. And if you're looking to cook out some things here in northeastern Ohio, I would suggest grilling out some of these grilled Polish boy sandwiches. You need a good hearty sausage, some type of Polish kielbasa maybe. You need a good hearty bun and some other ingredients like a snazzy, delicious barbecue sauce, a coleslaw, and you got to add some sort of potato, some sort of French fry, or maybe a tater tot. So check that recipe out. I have that on the other podcast, the Stadium Mustard Show, and listen to all of our podcasts on the Fanatical Elves Network. We'll have our Any Given Sunday show tomorrow, Sunday, as we gear up for this next week's list of podcasts. We might be changing a few things around with our getting out our shows because it is the 4th of July on Tuesday, but we have What the Elf Was That with Joel Cade. We have football philosophy and rocket science with Elliot and Joel Cade. And then we also have our Dog Pound South with Steve Gill. And we can't forget about the Browns Blitz with Rod Bloom. Again, guys, hope you all have a great rest of your evening. Happy 4th of July. I'm your host, John Suchan. Thank you for listening to us on the Johnny Cleveland podcast. Take care, and remember to keep smiling.